ENUSI, Guard Putin. Yes, that one. The man Biden called a butcher, who is depicted on t-shirts with a German mustache in Warsaw and simultaneously on posters with a dove of peace in Beijing. I've been standing behind him for 15 years. And you know what? In those 15 years, I've had 3 heart attacks. Not real ones, but close. There was a moment when I almost elbowed the German chancellor in the jaw. There was a day I stood 2 meters from a man with a pistol and prayed my hands wouldn't shake too soon. And there was one completely idiotic evening when the most guarded man on the planet asked me to get him ice cream. Vanilla. In a waffle cone. Because he felt like it. Welcome to my terrifying life. I'd rather work 50 hours a week in an office than with a sweaty butt and stress that hits your head harder than Mike Tyson. So, now I'm going to tell you how to guard the most challenging man in the world. Vladimir Putin. I'll start with the day my butt really got so sweaty you could wring it out. It was 2012, Moscow, a large public event, exiting through the central entrance, a crowd of about 300 people. Journalists, onlookers, fans, and those who weren't fans but came to watch. I was on the left, 3 steps away. I scanned the crowd. It's a professional zen, looking at everyone and no one at the same time, noticing hands, noticing eyes, noticing who stands too straight and who breathes too evenly. And then, a man. Gray jacket, right hand going into his pocket. Slowly. Too slowly for someone just scratching an itch. My body reacted before my head. I was already yelling into the radio, already moving, already seeing colleagues on the left repositioning, all in seconds, fractions of a second, and in that moment, one thought. If I'm wrong, I write a report tomorrow. If I'm not wrong, I just do my job. The man turned out to be a photographer. He was reaching for his lens. I still took him down. Reflexes don't ask for permission. He yelled about human rights and freedom of the press. I held his face to the asphalt and thought, thank God, thank God, thank God. Later, they let him go, and he wrote an article saying Putin's guards were brainless robots. I read it. I wasn't offended. That, by the way, is a professional compliment. It's good no one pulled a Glock. That would have been a circus. But sometimes it was real. With gunfire, I mean. More on that later. First, how did a normal kid from a Ryazan backwater end up being the kind of person who takes down photographers at the state's expense and sees Putin's bald spot almost every day? I was born in a place even the best geographers wouldn't find on a map. Ryazan region, a village, 2 streets, and a store proudly named Products that sold everything but decent food. Father, mechanic, mother, math teacher, just enough money not to think about money, which meant thinking about it constantly. But I was good at fighting. In the 90s, in the village, that was the only career skill that actually worked. At 18, the Army, Airborne Forces, Pskov. 2 years knocked all the stupidity out of me and replaced it with another kind of stupidity, a professional one. I stayed in the Army by contract. Then more. Then men in plain clothes showed up. Spies, I thought. Do you know what recruitment into the Federal Protective Service, FSO, looks like? Not like in the movies. No, your country needs you with patriotic music. 2 men in gray sit opposite you watching. One says, "We have an offer." I say, "I'm listening." The second says, "First, a background check." That's it. For 6 months, they checked me as if I were going to marry their daughter and be a foreign agent at the same time. Polygraph 3 times. A psychologist every 2 weeks. A woman with a quiet voice and an X-ray gaze. She knew how to ask questions so you'd answer honestly before you even realized you were answering. Relatives. Everyone, including my second cousin from Voronezh, who had never done anything but grow tomatoes in his garden. They checked my uncle, too. Uncle, if you're reading this, hello. You're clean. I passed. They took me. And that's when the real fun began. The FSO, for those who don't know, is not just guards with pistols next to the president. If the U.S. Secret Service is a BMW, beautiful, expensive, everyone knows the brand, then the FSO is a Russian tank. Not beautiful, loud, but it plows through everything and doesn't ask questions. 20,000 people. The budget is classified. Really classified. Not, we don't tell, but you won't know. We guard the president, the prime minister, the Kremlin, Novo Ogaryovo, Sochi, 60 other facilities, plus communications, intelligence, counterintelligence, medicine, anti-terrorism. In short, a state within a state. With its own logic, its own rules, and its own specific sense of humor. So black you can't see coal next to it. First day on duty. The team leader, I'll just call him Boris, a man with a face like he'd been run over by a tank, gathered us, the newbies, and said one phrase. You are now furniture. Smart furniture, but furniture. I nodded seriously then. Young, first day, wanted to seem proper. Boris looked at me and said, Why are you nodding like a bobblehead? I said, Understood, comrade. He said, You understood nothing. You'll understand in 6 months. In 6 months I understood. In a year I understood deeper. In 5 years I understood I hadn't understood anything yet. Because furniture is theory. Practice is different. Practice is when at 3 a.m. you're on guard with a sausage sandwich in your pocket that you're quietly finishing, and suddenly a voice behind you. Haven't eaten in a while? You turn around. It's him, Putin. In a tracksuit with a folder of papers, walking from his office at 2 a.m. as if it's completely normal. I stand there with a sandwich in my hand and feel like a school kid caught cheating. A pause. 3 seconds that feel like 3 years. Then he says, Next time, take 2. You think worse at night without food? And walked on. I stood there for another 5 minutes, just holding the sandwich and blinking. That's when I realized I work for an unconventional man. Very unconventional. Now, about what you really want to know. What is he really like? Not the one shown on CNN with the caption, Dictator, and not the one shown on Channel 1 with the caption, Leader of the Nation. The real person in real space, 2 meters from me. In 15 years, I've accumulated so many observations that a psychotherapist would spend 10 years analyzing them. I'll tell you the main points. First, and this really blows your mind when you first see it, he knows everyone. Not, hello, how are you? From a cheat sheet like some leaders I won't name, but you'll guess. He really knows. Name, origin, family, what's going on. 3 months after I joined the Guard. 3 months I was a nobody, a new kid on the perimeter. He walks past, stops and says, Alexei, how's your father? Is everything okay at the factory? I stand there like a monument to myself. Where from? It's clear where from. He has a dossier on every guard thicker than my school report. But that he remembers and uses it. That's a separate skill. It's not accidental. It's a system. A person who knows about you is a person you trust. And a person you trust works better. Simple math, brilliantly executed. Second, improvisation. This is what makes guards' hair go gray in clumps. Normal protected persons have a route and they follow it. Point A, point B, everything checked, everything closed, everyone happy. With us, no. Let's take another road. That phrase haunts me in nightmares. The alternative route hasn't been checked, sniper positions haven't been secured, local police haven't been warned, and 8 hours of your work just went into the trash. But to object is useless. One of my colleagues, a big guy, a Sambo champion, once tried to explain why the route shouldn't be changed. He got a look. Just a look. 3 seconds of silence, and never explained anything again. To anyone. Anywhere. For any reason. 2011. Putin enters Sevastopol at the head of a biker column. Night wolves, 40,000 spectators, roaring engines, cameras from all over the world. A beautiful picture. Really beautiful. I saw it on TV later. It looked cool. But behind the scenes, we were all in a state of quiet hysteria because the final route was changed 20 minutes before the start. 20 minutes, Carl. 40,000 people in a crowd isn't an audience. It's chaos with enthusiasm. We physically couldn't block everything we needed to. He rode in. Everything went fine. The crowd roared with delight. Afterwards, I smoked around the corner for 10 minutes and thought about the meaning of life. But here's what's important. And this is what you can't understand from the outside. This improvisation isn't due to carelessness. It's deliberate. A person who always travels a predictable route is a predictable target. Unpredictability is protection. I was angry about it for years. Then one day it dawned on me, and I felt like an idiot for not realizing it sooner. He's always one step ahead, including ahead of those who guard him. Now, about negotiations, because that's a separate show, and I had the privilege of observing it from the best seats in the house. Helsinki, 2018, Summit with Trump. Outside, 500 journalists. Live hysteria, CNN, already had a headline before the meeting even started. Inside, silence, marble, 2 men at a table. Trump arrived with a team of 40, with advisors, with folders, with his famous energy of a man who always fills the space. He speaks loudly, gesticulates, smiles. He's a showman. That's not a criticism, just a fact. And in contrast, Putin. Sits, quietly, watches, waits. Trump speaks for about 3 minutes, finishes, pause, and then 3 short sentences, calmly, almost boringly, and Trump subtly shifts his posture, unnoticeable to the cameras. But I was 2 meters away. I noticed. That was the moment I realized. The difference isn't who's louder, but who knows how to be silent at the right moment. Merkel is a separate story. Angela Merkel physically couldn't be late. They say once the entire German delegation arrived 20 minutes early and sat in their cars just to enter exactly on time. Punctuality as a national trait elevated to a cult. And then, for a meeting with her, a 4-hour delay. 4 hours. Merkel, an iron lady. She survived the GDR, German reunification, the Greek crisis, and Schröder. Sat and waited. Her face in the photos from that day is a separate art form. German restraint versus Russian. We'll come when we come. Lateness isn't rudeness. It's a message. I am more important than the schedule. Without words, without scandal, just a fact. Diplomacy is like that. Sometimes what's unsaid is more important than what's said. G8 Summit, Deauville, 2011. Obama. I was there as part of the security detail and saw the beginning of the meeting. Obama had stopped at a burger joint beforehand. It made the news. Everyone wrote about it, like a simple guy who doesn't forget common pleasures. And then the first 20 minutes of the meeting, about burgers. Putin talks about burgers. Jokes, smiles, Obama laughs. The atmosphere is warm. Everyone is relaxed. The American delegation is pleased. Here it is. Human interaction, not a Cold War. And then the conversation sharply shifts to where it needs to go, and the Americans are slightly out of rhythm, a little off balance. A trifle? No. It's a technique. First relax, then work. Every time. Now, about the routine, because that explains a lot. He lives on a shifted schedule. He starts around 10 or 11, ends at 2, 3 in the morning, sometimes later. For him, this is normal. For everyone around him, it's hell. Ministers, advisors, assistants, everyone lives in phone always nearby, always mode. A call at midnight with a question about documents isn't an emergency. It's Tuesday. One official told our guys, without malice, rather with pride, that he hadn't been to the theater on a Saturday night for 3 years, because Saturday night is traditionally the time for assignments for the next week. Yet he himself lives exactly the same way. He doesn't impose the schedule on others while he rests. He's in it himself, constantly. This changes attitudes. When you see the person at the top working harder than you, it's hard to complain. Physical fitness. As a specialist, I speak factually. We, the security detail, take physical tests every 6 months. Fail. Goodbye. The standards are strict. And yet, he, A man over 70 swims a kilometer to a kilometer and a half freestyle every morning in the Novo Ogariovo pool. Not for cameras. There are no cameras there. He just swims. Then the gym. This isn't for show. I've seen it with my own eyes hundreds of times, at 5 in the morning when half his staff is still sleeping. Judo, 8th Dan. And it's not a bought rank. It really works. Once during training, I was standing nearby. He took down a sparring partner of about 35 years old in such a way that the man got up with the face of someone who had just been taught something important about life, without extra words. Now, about the moment I promised at the beginning, about the man with the pistol. That wasn't 2012 with the photographer. That was earlier, in 2009, and it wasn't Moscow. A trip to a region, a small city, a meeting with local officials, a routine event, nothing special on paper. But on paper, many things are nothing special until they become special. A man in the crowd, behind the barrier, hand in his pocket, not moving. That's worse than when it moves. When it moves, you see what's happening. I look at him. He looks straight ahead. Not at him, but slightly past. That's how people look when they're waiting for a moment. I quietly say into the radio, "Second, by the barrier, blue jacket, 3 o'clock. 4 seconds later, 2 of our guys are next to him. Hand out a pocket, a knife. Not a pistol, a knife. Small, almost a penknife. Zero logic, zero chance. But the intention was there. They took him away quietly without a fuss. The public noticed nothing. He was yelling something about injustice and personal grievances. There are surprisingly many such people, with personal grievances. Resentful middle-aged men? That's the real risk group, remember that. After such moments, your hands don't shake, and you don't have nightmares. That's what movies get wrong. After such moments, you just become a little more attentive to hands in pockets. Forever. You know what's strangest about this job? I guard a man who, if you believe Western headlines, is hated by half the planet. CNN, BBC, German newspapers, Polish politicians. Everyone has their own opinion, everyone has their own image. I've read such things about him that sometimes I think, who are they even talking about? The one I know, or a character they invented for their audience? Because the man I see every day, he's not a villain from a Hollywood movie. He's more complex, colder, and in some ways, more interesting than any caricature, his own or someone else's. Once, it was after a very tough day, many meetings, long negotiations, everyone on edge. He walks past my post and stops, looks at me, says, "Did you eat properly today?" I say, "Yes, sir." He looks for a second. "Don't lie." I say, "Had a sandwich." He nods. "Bad," and walked off. That's it. No follow-up, no moral, just stating a fact. But the next day, a thermos with food appeared at the post. Where it came from, no one explained. It was just there. This is the answer to the question of what he's really like. Not speeches, not summits, not headlines. A thermos at the post at 3 in the morning. Details. They never lie. I've stood behind him for 15 years. I've seen him next to kings and presidents, seen him fishing at 4 in the morning, seen him after negotiations that lasted 8 hours nonstop, seen him when everything went according to plan and when everything went wrong. And here's what I'll say. Without pathos, without propaganda, just as a person who knows, he is not a simple man. Not simple at all. And working next to him, it doesn't make you important or cool. It makes you very attentive to details, to gestures, to what people don't say out loud. And it also makes you a person who never, never forgets to bring 2 sandwiches to your post. At least 2. Because the nights are long and you never know who might stop by to check.